Picture this. You're walking down a quiet suburban street, the sun warming the pavement beneath your feet, when suddenly the ground beneath you vanishes. In a heartbeat, what was solid earth becomes a gaping maw, swallowing cars, homes, and even entire city blocks without warning. This isn't a scene from a disaster movie. It's the terrifying reality of sinkholes, nature's most unpredictable and bizarre phenomenon, lurking just beneath our feet. Across the United States, these hidden voids have opened up in the most shocking places, turning everyday life into a nightmare in seconds. A family's bedroom vanishes into the earth as they sleep. A bustling highway collapses into an abyss during rush hour. Even a luxury resort's swimming pool drops into the darkness, leaving guests staring into a crater where laughter once echoed. These aren't freak accidents, they're reminders that the ground we trust isn't as stable as we think. The stories behind these sinkholes are stranger than fiction, each one revealing the raw, untamed power of geology in action. Some form over centuries, hidden rivers silently dissolving rock until the surface can no longer hold. Others strike like lightning, triggered by broken water mains or ancient caverns finally giving way. But what makes them truly chilling is their randomness. They don't discriminate suburbs, cities, even the middle of a golf course are all fair game. And when they open, they rewrite landscapes in an instant, leaving behind scars that defy explanation. Take the infamous Winter Park sinkhole that swallowed a Porsche dealership, a swimming pool, and half a street in Florida. Or the monstrous hole in Louisiana that devoured an entire forest, trees and all, like something out of a horror movie. These aren't just holes in the ground, they're portals to the Earth's hidden volatility, proof that beneath our manicured lawns and paved roads, chaos waits. So why do these bizarre events keep happening, and where will the next one strike? That's exactly what we're about to uncover. From the sleepy town where a sinkhole became a tourist attraction overnight to the neighborhood that literally split in half, we've scoured the country for the 31 most jaw-dropping sinkhole stories in U.S. history. Some will leave you stunned, others might make you glance nervously at your own backyard. But one thing's for sure, by the time we're done, you'll never look at solid ground the same way again. Ready to peer into the abyss? Let's dive in. The story begins in a quiet Florida neighborhood where the ground held a secret, one that would turn an ordinary night into pure chaos. It was March 1981 when the earth beneath Winter Park simply gave way. First came the cracks in driveways, subtle warnings ignored until the unthinkable happened. A 3-story home, a Porsche dealership, and even an Olympic-sized swimming pool were suddenly devoured by a gaping crater over 300 feet wide. The so-called Great Blue Hole didn't just collapse, it transformed the landscape into something out of a disaster film, leaving residents stunned and authorities scrambling. What made this sinkhole so terrifying was its speed. Unlike slow-forming depressions, this one struck with violent suddenness, triggered by Florida's fragile underground limestone. Over centuries, acidic rainwater had secretly dissolved the rock, carving out hidden caverns. Then, without warning, the thin ceiling of earth above collapsed, as if the ground itself had been holding its breath before exhaling in one catastrophic instant. The aftermath looked like a war-zone twisted rebar where homes once stood, chunks of asphalt dangling over the abyss, and the eerie silence of a neighborhood forever altered. But the strangest chapter came when divers ventured into the flooded crater. Descending into the murky water, they found cars suspended in the darkness, their headlights still intact as if frozen in mid-plunge. The pool's diving board jutted out over nothingness, a haunting reminder of the ordinary life that once existed here. Even more unsettling, the sinkhole wasn't done. Over time, it kept growing, swallowing more land until it became a permanent lake, a tourist curiosity masking the sheer destructive power lurking beneath. Geologists later confirmed what locals feared. Florida's porous foundation means this could happen again, anywhere, at any time. the Great Blue Hole wasn't just a freak accident. It was a warning. In the days following Winter Park's nightmare, the true scale of the disaster became painfully clear. Families who had fled with only the clothes on their backs returned to find their homes literally swallowed by the earth. Irreplaceable heirlooms, family photos, and entire lifetimes of memories now buried under 60 feet of murky water. The local Red Cross scrambled to provide temporary shelter, but how do you rebuild when the very ground beneath you is untrustworthy? Some residents never returned, too traumatized by the sound of cracking earth in the dead of night. Others defiantly stayed nearby, though their eyes would constantly dart to cracks in sidewalks, wondering if today would be the day history repeated itself. The legal battles that followed were just as harrowing. Insurance companies initially refused claims, arguing sinkholes were acts of God rather than covered disasters. Homeowners found themselves trapped in bureaucratic limbo, unable to sell properties now deemed worthless, yet barred from rebuilding on land labeled geologically unstable. It took years of lawsuits and new state laws forcing insurers to recognize sinkhole damage before families saw compensation. Even then, payouts rarely covered the emotional toll of losing a home to something as unfathomable as the earth opening up without warning. Scientists descended on Winter Park too, turning the disaster zone into a living laboratory. Core samples revealed the fragile honeycomb of limestone beneath central Florida, while sonar mapped the crater's ever-shifting edges. Their most chilling discovery, the underground voids weren't isolated. Dozens of similar caverns lurked beneath nearby neighborhoods, some just one heavy rainstorm away from collapse. This research revolutionized sinkhole monitoring today. Ground-penetrating radar and satellite scans help detect early warning signs, though predicting exactly when or where the next collapse will happen remains frustratingly elusive. Perhaps the strangest legacy emerged when the sinkhole stopped growing. What had been a nightmare became a spectacle. Curious tourists piled into boats to peer into the cerulean waters now hiding the wreckage below. Developers proposed turning the site into a bizarre attraction, complete with underwater viewing platforms to spot the sunken portions and fragments of lost homes. The community was torn. Should they memorialize the trauma or let nature reclaim it? In the end, Lake Rose, as it was diplomatically renamed, became both a solemn reminder and an accidental landmark, its serene surface belying the chaos beneath. The most haunting lesson from Winter Park wasn't about geology, it was about human resilience. Neighbors who lost everything formed tight-knit support groups, sharing everything from spare toothbrushes to legal advice. Children who'd watched their backyards disappear grew up to become geologists, determined to solve the mysteries that had upended their lives. And every year on the anniversary, locals gather at the lake's edge, not in mourning but in quiet defiance, proving that even when the ground literally vanishes beneath your feet, community can be the one thing that never collapses. Bowling Green, Kentucky was supposed to be the safest place on earth for classic cars until the ground literally dropped out from under them. On February 12, 2014, the unthinkable happened at the National Corvette Museum. Security cameras captured every surreal second as the concrete floor erupted, sending 8 priceless Corvettes crashing into a 30-foot deep sinkhole. One moment, these automotive legends were pristine showpieces. The next, they were tumbling like toys into a jagged pit, their fiberglass bodies cracking against collapsing rubble. The footage went viral, not just for the shocking destruction, but for the eerie slow-motion spectacle of a $1 million collection vanishing into the earth. The museum's Skydome exhibit had been a shrine to Corvette history, housing rare models like the 1 millionth production Corvette ever built and a one-of-a-kind prototype worth over $1 million. When engineers later examined the cavern beneath, they uncovered a hidden network of limestone tunnels, some so vast they could have parked a semi-truck inside. Kentucky's karst terrain, riddled with soluble rock, had been secretly eroding for millennia. A single heavy rainfall was all it took to weaken the ceiling's fragile support, triggering the collapse. The most chilling detail, this sinkhole wasn't some rural anomaly. It formed directly beneath a major tourist attraction, proving nowhere was truly safe. What happened next became a testament to human determination. Restoration teams faced a nightmare scenario: cars buried under tons of dirt, their frames twisted, paint shattered. The 1 millionth Corvette suffered catastrophic damage, its roof crushed like a soda can. Yet rather than declare them lost causes, experts treated each vehicle like an archaeological artifact. Meticulous laser scans mapped every fracture, while master craftsmen spent thousands of hours hand-shaping replacement parts from original blueprints. Some argued it'd be cheaper to build replicas, but for the Corvette community, these wrecks were sacred. Their scars told a story, one of survival. The museum made an unexpected decision. They left part of the sinkhole intact. Today, visitors peer through glass floors at the repaired chasm, a humbling reminder of nature's power. Two of the mangled Corvettes stand nearby, unrestored, their wreckage displayed with pride. Because sometimes the most valuable relics aren't the ones that survive untouched, but the ones that prove, even when the earth betrays you, there's still a way back. The recovery team faced a painstaking challenge that would make any car enthusiast wince. Among the 8 Corvettes swallowed by the sinkhole, some were beyond repair, like the 2001 Mallet Hammer Z06. Its frame snapped like a twig under the weight of collapsing concrete. But others, despite their horrifying plunge, still had hope. The 1 millionth Corvette, a white 1992 convertible, became the symbol of the rescue effort. Its roof was crushed, windows shattered, and interior filled with mud, but its iconic status made restoration non-negotiable. Mechanics worked with forensic precision, disassembling every bolt, cleaning each gear, and even preserving the original Kentucky mud still caked in the wheel wells as a haunting reminder of its ordeal. The most remarkable survivor, the one-of-a-kind 1983 Corvette prototype, known as the King of the Hill. This rare gem, one of only 3 ever built, had been submerged upside down in debris. Yet against all odds, its fiberglass body retained enough structural integrity to be saved. Restorers compared the process to reconstructing a shattered vase using 3D scans to identify every fracture, then hand-forming replacement panels from original molds. The project took over 5,000 hours, but when the car finally rolled back onto the showroom floor, you'd never guess it had once been buried under 12 feet of rubble. What truly set this disaster apart was how the museum transformed tragedy into an unforgettable experience. Rather than hide the evidence, they leaned into it. 2 Corvettes, the 2009 ZR1 Blue Devil and a 1962 model, were left exactly as they'd been pulled from the pit, their crumpled frames displayed like battle scars. Visitors now walk across a glass floor suspended over the stabilized sinkhole, peering down into the abyss that nearly stole automotive history. The exhibit doesn't shy away from the terror of that morning. Security footage plays on loop, capturing the heart-stopping moment the earth opened up. But the real genius move, turning the wreckage into a fundraiser. Salvaged parts, twisted fenders, cracked taillights, even chunks of sinkhole debris were auctioned off as macabre collectibles. A single scrap of the 1 millionth Corvette's upholstery fetched over $4,000, proving that even in ruin, these cars held irreplaceable value. The museum's attendance skyrocketed, with fans flocking to see the Great Corvette cave in long after the last car was restored. It's a masterclass in resilience. Where most would see only loss, they found a way to make the Earth's betrayal part of their legacy. Because sometimes the most compelling stories aren't about perfection, but about what survives when the world tries to swallow you whole. Louisiana's Bayou Corne was the kind of place where life moved slow. Fishing boats gliding through cypress trees, neighbors swapping stories on creaky porches. Then, in August 2012, the bayou itself began to disappear. First came the bubbles. Fishermen noticed strange gas pockets surfacing in the water, hissing like 1,000 serpents. Then the ground trembled, trees tilted at eerie angles, and finally, the earth split open with a roar heard for miles. What emerged wasn't just a sinkhole, it was a growing monster swallowing 100-year-old oaks, docks, and eventually over 30 acres of land. This wasn't natural erosion. It was industrial sabotage written in geological carnage. At the heart of the disaster lay the Napoleonville Salt Dome, a colossal underground formation where a Texas drilling company had been mining caverns to store natural gas. Workers pumped out salt brine, creating hollowed-out chambers beneath the swamp. But one cavern, operated by Occidental Petroleum, had been carved too close to the dome's edge. The walls collapsed like a house of cards, triggering a chain reaction that destabilized the entire area. The sinkhole wasn't just devouring land, it was belching methane and crude oil, turning the bayou into a toxic soup. Scientists warned the nightmare was far from over. The hole could keep expanding for decades, potentially reaching nearby highways and pipelines. For the 350 residents of Bayou Corne, evacuation orders came too late. Some had just minutes to grab pets and medications before their homes were declared uninhabitable. Others returned weeks later to find their properties condemned, the stench of hydrocarbons permeating every wall. The emotional toll was staggering. One elderly couple, the Landrys, had lived in their shotgun house for 60 years only to watch it literally crack in half as the ground beneath it yawned open. The community's pain was compounded by the company's response, years of denials, legal maneuvering, and a settlement that left many feeling betrayed. The environmental fallout was apocalyptic. The sinkhole became a graveyard for wildlife. Alligators choked on benzene, turtles vanished into the frothing muck, and migratory birds avoided the area entirely. Groundwater tests revealed carcinogens at levels 1,000 times above safe limits. Even the air wasn't safe. State officials handed out explosive gas detectors, warning residents to flee if alarms sounded. Geologists monitoring the site made another chilling discovery. Seismic activity suggested more collapses were possible. The cavern hadn't just failed, it had essentially turned the entire salt dome into a ticking time bomb. Legal battles dragged on for years, exposing shocking negligence. Internal documents revealed workers had noted warning signs, abnormal pressure readings, equipment failures, but management pressed on. When a judge finally approved a settlement in 2015, the payout barely covered relocation costs for displaced families. Meanwhile, the hole kept growing, surpassing 25 acres by 2018, its depth equivalent to a 10-story building. Cleanup crews pumped out millions of gallons of contaminated water, but the damage was irreversible. Today, Bayou Corne stands as a grim monument to corporate recklessness. Fenced-off areas warn of subsidence zones, while methane monitors blink ominously along deserted roads. Yet amidst the devastation, a bizarre ecosystem emerged. The sinkhole's acidic waters birthed extremophile bacteria never before documented, and its sheer scale attracted geotourists peering through chain-link fences. For scientists, it's a living lab on human-induced geological disasters. For residents, it's a wound that never quite healed, a reminder that some holes aren't just in the ground, but in the fabric of trust between communities and the industries they once welcomed. Walking through Bayou Corne today feels like stepping onto a movie set after the apocalypse. Porch swings sway empty in the breeze, their chains creaking against silence. Faded Mardi Gras beads still dangle from tree branches, left behind when residents fled. The only movement comes from caution tape fluttering around sinkhole warning signs, their bold red letters screaming, "Danger, subsidence zone." This wasn't just an evacuation, it was the unmaking of an entire community, leaving behind a ghost town where crayfish boils and zydeco music once filled the air. The environmental scars run deeper than the sinkhole itself. Rainbow sheens of oil still bubble up in stagnant ponds, and the smell of rotten eggs' hydrogen sulfide gas hangs thick near collapsed areas. Scientists discovered something even more disturbing. The ground isn't just sinking in one spot. Satellite imagery shows a sprawling network of micro-sinkholes forming like pockmarks across the bayou, evidence that the salt dome's collapse triggered cascading failures underground. Some homes still standing lean at carnival mirror angles, their foundations cracked as the earth beneath them slowly dissolves. One church, its steeple now crooked, stands with doors wide open, pews still neatly arranged, hymnals gathering dust as if waiting for a congregation that will never return. For former residents, the loss cuts beyond property. Generations of family histories, hand-carved duck decoys, photo albums of swamp baptisms, even graves in the local cemetery were abandoned overnight. The Landry family's fishing camp, where 5 generations learned to gig frogs, now sits half-submerged in toxic water. It's not just land that sank, one displaced resident told reporters. It's our whole way of life. The few who refuse to leave live in surreal limbo, like the elderly trapper who still poles his pirogue past no trespassing signs to check crab traps in the contamination zone. The eerie quiet is punctuated by unnerving sounds. Deep underground, the salt dome groans as shifting rock creates low-frequency tremors. At night, methane flares cast an orange glow over the sinkhole, burning off gas that could otherwise explode. Most haunting of all are the bubbles, endless streams of them rising from the water, popping with a sound locals call the bayou's death rattle. Researchers say each bubble represents another pocket of collapsing earth, meaning this disaster could continue unfolding for another 50 years. Yet life, stubborn as ever, has begun creeping back at the edges. Carnivorous plants thrive in the acidic wetlands, their sticky traps glistening with insects. A lone bald eagle nests in a cypress tree overlooking the destruction, and nutria rats gnaw at the abandoned docks. Even the toxic sinkhole itself has become an accidental ecosystem, with extremophile bacteria forming bizarre, iridescent mats across its surface. Scientists monitor these adaptations closely, studying how life rebounds in man-made wastelands. The real lesson of Bayou Corne isn't just about geology gone wrong, it's about the fragility of trust. Many residents had worked for the very companies that caused the disaster, believing their jobs were secure. Now, faded bumper stickers reading "Pipelines pay our bills" peel off abandoned trucks. The community's fate hangs over other salt dome operations across the Gulf Coast, where similar gas storage projects continue despite warnings from geologists. As one researcher put it, "We didn't just lose a town here, we got a preview." The ground had been whispering its warnings for days. Tiny fissures spiderwebbed across driveways in Winter Park's upscale neighborhood, dismissed as harmless settling until that morning in March 1981 when the earth finally screamed. Residents described the sound as a thunderclap from below, a deafening roar as the street split open like rotten fruit. Within minutes, a 300-foot-wide chasm yawned beneath Sunshine Boulevard, swallowing a home's entire back patio, 5 Porsches at a dealership, and the deep end of a community swimming pool. 1 second, a lifeguard stood watching swimmers. The next, she was sprinting from a collapsing concrete deck as chlorinated water cascaded into the abyss. Eyewitness accounts read like disaster movie scripts. Harold Johnson, then a 23-year-old mechanic at the dealership, recalled watching a brand new 928 sink nose first into the pit. "It wasn't plunging, it was floating down," he said, like the ground had turned to quicksand. Next door, homeowner Margaret Hagan woke to her bedroom tilting at a 30-degree angle. The dresser slid into the wall, then the wall wasn't there anymore, she told reporters. Miraculously, everyone escaped alive, but the trauma lingered. Emergency responders arriving at the scene faced an unprecedented challenge. How do you rescue people when the danger isn't fire or flood, but the vanishing of solid ground itself? What made Winter Park's sinkhole an engineering nightmare was its insatiable appetite. Unlike static craters, this one expanded hourly, chewing through sewer lines and sidewalks like some subterranean beast. Stabilization became a high-stakes race against geology. Engineers pioneered daring techniques still used today, injecting grout into the sinkhole's throat to prevent further collapse, then layering it with compacted clay to seal the surface. Divers explored the murky depths, discovering the pool's diving board perfectly intact, just suspended over a 100-foot void, their most chilling find. A network of limestone caverns branching far beyond the collapse zone, meaning the entire neighborhood sat atop a honeycomb of potential disasters. The aftermath rewrote Florida's building codes. Ground-penetrating radar became mandatory for new developments, and insurance companies scrambled to create sinkhole coverage, but the most profound change was psychological. Winter Park proved that even in America's most manicured suburbs, the earth could betray you without warning. Today, what locals call the Big Hole is Lake Rose, its tranquil blue waters hiding the cars, porcelain bathtubs, and fragments of lives swallowed 30 years ago. The swimming pool's outline is still visible from above, a ghostly rectangle beneath the surface, where laughter and splashes once echoed before the ground remembered it could yawn. What began as a neighborhood nightmare soon transformed into something nobody expected, a bizarre, shimmering oasis. As the Winter Park sinkhole stabilized, the murky floodwaters that once hid swallowed homes began to clear, revealing an almost otherworldly shade of blue. The mineral-rich groundwater filtered through limestone turned the crater into an accidental cenote, one that glowed gemstone bright under Florida's relentless sun. Locals, initially terrified to approach the edge, found themselves drawn to its eerie beauty. Kids dared each other to skim stones across the surface, while geologists marveled at the perfect cross-section of earth layers visible along the crater's walls. The very thing that had ripped apart their community was becoming impossible to ignore. City officials faced an unusual dilemma. The sinkhole had destabilized property values for blocks, but filling it would cost millions with no guarantee the ground wouldn't collapse again. Then came the unexpected proposal. What if they leaned into the disaster? Engineers sculpted the crater's edges into gentle slopes, planted native grasses to prevent erosion, and added a walking path around the perimeter. By 1983, what was once a gaping wound had been christened Lake Rose, named not for the flower but for Rose Phelps, the elderly widow whose house had vanished into its depths. The irony wasn't lost on residents. A place that had stolen so much was now memorializing one of its victims. Tourists flocked almost immediately. Postcards appeared in gift shops showing the world-famous Winter Park sinkhole, its waters improbably tropical against the suburban backdrop. Sightseeing boats offered geological tragedy tours, their guides pointing out where the pool's high dive had once stood. Entrepreneurial locals sold sinkhole-shaped chocolates and T-shirts reading, "I survived the Big Hole." Even the swallowed Porsche dealership got a macabre tribute, a plaque marking the spot where luxury cars had disappeared, alongside a salvaged headlight displayed like a museum artifact. The lake became such a draw that property values nearby actually rebounded, with new homes boasting sinkhole views as a selling point. Yet beneath the surface, literal and metaphorical tensions simmered. Some survivors couldn't bear to visit, the sight of kayakers paddling over their former bedrooms twisting like a knife. Others, like retired teacher Elena Shaw, found unexpected healing in the transformation. "Every morning I drink my coffee where my azalea bushes used to be," she told a reporter in 1985. "The water's so clear, some days I swear I can see my china cabinet down there." Scientists, too, capitalized on the interest, installing educational displays explaining karst geology, turning gawkers into amateur hydrologists. The most surreal moment came when professional divers explored the submerged wreckage for a documentary crew. Cameras captured their flashlight beams revealing eerie tableaus. a kitchen chair perched upright on a silt-covered floor, a street lamp still glowing faintly under 30 feet of water after its wiring short-circuited during the collapse. These images, broadcast nationwide, cemented Lake Rose's reputation as both a natural wonder and a memorial to the uncanny. Today, it remains a paradox, a place of leisure built on loss where picnickers spread blankets just yards above forgotten living rooms. The lesson couldn't be clearer. In America, even disasters get second acts. Sometimes the ground doesn't just swallow things, it gives birth to something entirely new. Jeff Bush was asleep in his Seffner, Florida bedroom when the earth decided to claim him. It was 2:30 in the morning on February 28, 2013, a night that began like any other in the quiet suburb of Tampa. His brother Jeremy, sleeping just down the hall, would later describe the sound as a car crashing into the house, followed by something far worse, Jeff's screams. Rushing into the room, Jeremy found a nightmare. The floor had collapsed into a gaping pit 20 feet wide, swallowing Jeff's bed whole. All that remained was a jagged hole, piles of debris, and the faint echo of his brother's last cries vanishing into the dark. He dove in after him, clawing at the dirt until rescuers pulled him back, his arms bloodied from the effort. By then, there was no sign of Jeff, just the sinkhole's insatiable maw still groaning as it expanded beneath their feet. Emergency responders faced a horrifying dilemma. The house was literally coming apart around them, walls cracking, floors buckling, yet every instinct demanded they search for Jeff. Firefighters lowered cameras and listening devices into the pit, but the collapsing soil kept triggering false alarms. One rescuer described the soil as quicksand made of broken limestone, shifting unpredictably with each attempt to probe deeper. After hours of futile effort, engineers made the agonizing call. The structure was too unstable. They'd have to demolish the house to excavate the sinkhole, knowing full well Jeff was likely buried under 60 feet of earth. His family held out hope anyway, clinging to the 1 in a million chance he'd survived in an air pocket. But as the days passed, even that slim possibility faded. The county officially declared the site a grave site, leaving Jeff's body entombed below what had once been his childhood home. What made Seffner's sinkhole particularly cruel was its stealth. Unlike Winter Park's dramatic collapse or Bayou Corne's visible warnings, this one gave almost no indication it was coming. Neighbors reported no prior cracking in roads or foundations, just ordinary Florida terrain one moment, a death trap the next. When geologists later analyzed the site, they traced the collapse to a single weak point, an ancient limestone cavity the size of a school bus, its roof eroded to eggshell thinness by decades of groundwater. The weight of Jeff's bedroom, just 12 square feet of floor, was the final straw. Worse still, ground-penetrating radar revealed dozens of similar voids lurking under neighboring houses. Some were even larger than the one that killed Jeff. Overnight, an entire community became acutely aware that their sense of safety was an illusion, their bedrooms potentially built over invisible tombs. The legal aftermath was as messy as the sinkhole itself. Florida law classified this as an act of God, leaving the Bush family with no recourse against the home's builder or previous owners. Their insurance covered the demolished house but offered nothing for emotional damages, a bitter pill when reporters asked Jeff's mother, Janie, about compensation. "No amount of money brings back my son," she told a press conference, her voice shaking. "I just want people to know this wasn't some freak accident. It's Florida's dirty secret." Her words ignited a statewide debate. Critics blasted lax building codes that allowed homes atop unstable karst formations, while developers argued predicting every sinkhole was impossible. The compromise, a new law requiring more rigorous geological surveys for new constructions, though existing neighborhoods like Seffner remained untouched. For years after the demolition, the vacant lot where Jeff died became an unofficial memorial. Strangers left flowers at the chain-link fence, some whispering prayers into the dirt. His family refused to move away, buying another house just blocks from the site, as if leaving would mean abandoning Jeff twice. Neighbors developed odd rituals like tapping their bedroom floors each night to check for hollowness. The psychological scars ran deeper than the sinkhole itself, proof that some wounds never fully close. Scientists still study Seffner's collapse as a worst-case scenario, using it to refine early warning systems. But for those who lived through it, the lesson was simpler and darker. Sometimes the Earth doesn't just swallow things. It swallows people whole and without warning, leaving nothing but questions echoing in the void. The ground beneath Seffner didn't betray Jeff Bush by accident. It was a geological time bomb waiting for the right moment to detonate. Florida's foundation is built on a fragile skeleton of limestone, a porous rock that dissolves like sugar in water over centuries. Rainwater, slightly acidic from absorbing carbon dioxide in the air, seeps through soil and begins eroding hidden tunnels beneath the surface. These cavities grow silently, sometimes for thousands of years, until the weight above becomes too much. What made Jeff's sinkhole different wasn't the process, it was the terrifying speed. Most sinkholes form gradually, with warning signs like sagging fences or cracked driveways. His opened in seconds with no visible clues because the ceiling of the underground cavity had thinned to less than an inch before finally shattering. Geologists studying the aftermath made a chilling discovery. Using ground-penetrating radar, they mapped a network of similar voids beneath the neighborhood, some even larger than the one that swallowed Jeff's bedroom. The limestone ceiling of these caverns was so thin in places, a heavy rainstorm or even the vibration of a passing truck could have triggered collapse. Even more unsettling, standard home inspections rarely check for these hidden dangers. Before 2013, Florida law only required sinkhole assessments if a property showed visible damage. By then, it's often too late. The disaster forced scientists to rethink early detection. Today, teams use advanced tools like electrical resistivity tomography, essentially creating underground CT scans to spot hidden cavities before they collapse. Satellite radar can now detect ground movement as subtle as a millimeter, identifying areas where the Earth is secretly shifting. But these technologies aren't perfect. Karst landscapes like Florida's are riddled with tiny fractures that don't always lead to catastrophe. Predicting which weak spots will fail is like guessing which grain of sand will tip a landslide. Engineers also learned brutal lessons about stabilization. Traditional methods like pumping grout into sinkholes often fail because the material can't reach the deepest fractures. New techniques involve injecting expansive polyurethane foam that fills every crevice, then hardens into a flexible web strong enough to support collapsing rock. Some neighborhoods now install sinkhole alarms, sensors that detect subsurface movement and alert residents before the ground gives way. Yet for all this innovation, the hardest truth remains. In places like Seffner, the Earth's memory is long. The same forces that carved those deadly voids are still at work, dissolving rock grain by grain, rewriting the landscape beneath our feet while we sleep. The most haunting revelation came from core samples drilled near Jeff's home. Layers of sediment revealed that identical collapses had happened there before centuries apart, with no pattern humans could predict. Ancient sinkholes had filled with debris over time, only to be forgotten until development paved over them. It's a cycle as old as the peninsula itself. The ground remembers what we never knew to ask. And sometimes it reminds us in the worst possible way. Deep in the backwaters of Louisiana's Atchafalaya Basin, where Spanish moss drapes over cypress knees and the air hums with cicadas, there's a sinkhole that doesn't just swallow land, it swallows stories. Locals call it the Devil's Swamp Hole, a murky pool where the water never stills, even on windless nights. Fishermen whisper about flickering lights beneath the surface, like submerged lanterns moving against the current. Hunters swear they've seen footprints leading to the edge but never away, and then there are the disappearances. At least 3 people have vanished near its banks since the 1950s, their boats found drifting empty, engines still running. Science blames unstable salt domes and methane leaks, but in the bayou, they'll tell you something else lives down there. The first recorded oddity came in 1957, when a trapper named Remy Lejeune reported a blue fire bubbling up from the sinkhole's depths. Wildlife agents dismissed it as swamp gas until they saw it themselves. Methane ignites, sure, but not in steady, deliberate streaks like the ones that danced across the water that night. Decades later, a team from LSU lowered cameras into the hole, hoping to document its geology. What they pulled up was a recording of something unexpected. The footage showed swirling sediment, sure, but also brief, blurred shapes too fast for fish, too large for alligators. When they enhanced the images, the outlines resembled humanoid figures, limbs elongated, drifting just beyond the camera's focus. The scientists chalked it up to debris. The student who'd operated the camera quit fieldwork the next day. Then came the acoustic anomalies. In 2011, a documentary crew dropped hydrophones into the sinkhole, hoping to record the sounds of collapsing sediment. Instead, they captured something locals had described for generations, a low, rhythmic thrumming like a heartbeat amplified through water. Geologists theorized it was pressurized gas escaping through fissures. But play that recording for someone raised on bayou folklore and they'll cross themselves. That's the sound of the Rougarou, they'll say, the Cajun werewolf said to guard gateways between worlds. The timing of the pulses didn't match any known seismic activity. Stranger still, the recording later vanished from the crew's hard drives, leaving only a written description in their notes. Science offers rational explanations, of course. The sinkhole sits atop a salt dome laced with oil deposits, where shifting pressures could create eerie sounds and lights. The figures on camera, likely pareidolia, the brain seeing faces in random patterns, but try telling that to the families of those who have disappeared. In 1984, 2 duck hunters vanished near the hole during a storm. Search teams found their rifles and a cooler full of beer on the bank, untouched. No signs of struggle, no note, just an empty pirogue tethered to a cypress root, as if they'd stepped out for a moment and never returned. The official report blamed a sudden methane release, knocking them unconscious before they drowned. Yet old-timers still leave tobacco pouches and shotgun shells at the site each hunting season. Offerings, they say, to whatever took those boys. Today, the Devil's Swamp Hole has become a macabre pilgrimage site. Paranormal investigators plant motion sensor cameras along the trees. Teenagers dare each other to swim across it at midnight. Even the wildlife behaves oddly here. Bullfrogs go silent when the water ripples without wind, and herons avoid its banks entirely. The most compelling evidence of something unnatural, though, might be the sinkhole's refusal to follow geological rules. Most grow gradually over years. This one, it's remained exactly 32 feet wide since the first survey in 1963, as if something's holding its edges in place. Scientists call it a fluke of hydrology. The locals know better. Some doors, they say, aren't meant to be opened, and some holes aren't meant to be measured, because sometimes the earth doesn't just collapse. Sometimes it wakes up. The water in Bayou Corne didn't just disappear, it turned into a poisonous stew. When the sinkhole first yawned open, it spewed a toxic cocktail of crude oil, hydrogen sulfide, and benzene, the same carcinogen linked to leukemia in refinery workers. The stench hit like a physical blow, sending birds plummeting from trees mid-flight and coating fish in a shimmering black sludge. Cleanup crews arriving in hazmat suits described the scene as an oil spill in reverse, where contamination wasn't spreading across water, it was erupting from beneath it. The sinkhole became a grotesque science experiment, churning up substances not seen on the surface since the Pleistocene era. One sample pulled from its depths contained methane concentrations so high, it could have asphyxiated a grown man in 3 breaths. The real horror, though, lay in what scientists couldn't immediately contain. Benzene levels in the groundwater tested at 1,200 parts per billion, 30 times Louisiana's safety limit. This wasn't just undrinkable, it was explosively volatile. Families received emergency kits with gas detectors that screamed like smoke alarms if airborne toxins reached lethal levels. "We slept with those things on our nightstands for 2 years," recalled displaced resident Claire Fontenot. "Every false alarm felt like Russian roulette." The cleanup strategy was as unprecedented as the disaster itself. Engineers deployed curtain walls of solidified bentonite clay to isolate the toxic plume, while vacuum trucks siphoned off millions of gallons of contaminated water for treatment. But the sinkhole fought back. Each extraction lowered the water table, causing new collapses along the crater's edges in a vicious cycle. Wildlife paid the steepest price. Biologists documented alligators with ulcerated hides and blind turtles, their eyes burned away by hydrocarbons. A once thriving population of paddlefish, ancient creatures that had survived since the dinosaurs, vanished entirely from the bayou. The most haunting images came from an infrared drone survey. Heat signatures showed deer and wild hogs instinctively avoiding the sinkhole's fumes, creating an eerie dead zone where no animals ventured within 300 yards. Even insects steered clear. Mosquitoes that typically swarm Louisiana wetlands refused to breed in the poisoned waters. Today, the cleanup enters its 2nd decade with no end in sight. Advanced oxidation systems now break down benzene molecules at the atomic level, while genetically engineered bacteria digest oil residues. Yet monitoring wells still detect toxins at 5 times safe levels in some spots. The sinkhole's legacy isn't just environmental, it's cultural. Traditional Human Nation fishermen who'd harvested these waters for generations lost not just income but sacred gathering sites. "Our ancestors' bones are in that mud," said tribal elder Thomas Dada, staring at the exclusion zone's barbed wire. Meanwhile, energy companies quietly lobby to reopen other salt dome storage sites, arguing Bayou Corne was a fluke. The bitter irony, this ecological disaster inadvertently became a climate research goldmine. Scientists discovered the extremophile bacteria thriving in the sinkhole's acidic depths produce enzymes that could revolutionize oil spill cleanups. Methane capture systems tested here now prevent emissions at landfills worldwide, and those same satellite radars that failed to predict the collapse now monitor Arctic permafrost for similar instability. Nature always balances her books, just never in ways we expect. Standing at the observation platform today, watching methane flares dance over the water, you're left with one unshakable thought: some wounds heal, but others become classrooms. And the lessons they teach are written in scars. Dizetta, Texas was a town built on oil, both its economy and its identity. So when the ground split open on May 7, 2008, swallowing the very industry that sustained the community, the irony wasn't lost on anyone. It started with a rumble residents compared to a freight train, then a sickening crunch as asphalt split down Main Street. Within hours, a crater the size of 2 football fields gaped where pipelines and storage tanks once stood, its edges crumbling inward like a slow-motion avalanche. Drone footage captured the surreal scale. Oil derricks tilted at drunken angles, their metal legs dangling over the abyss, while century-old oaks vanished into the pit as if yanked by invisible hands. What made Dizetta's sinkhole so visually staggering was its hunger. Unlike static collapses, this one expanded in real time, consuming everything in its path with terrifying patience. A bulldozer sent to stabilize the edge became part of the menu. Operators barely escaped as the machine slid backward into the hole, its diesel tank erupting in a fireball that lit up the crater like a helmet. The stench of crude oil mixed with splintered pine as the earth digested Dizetta's landmarks one by one. Yet amid the chaos, the town's dark humor shone through. "We always joked this place was going to hell," a local diner owner told reporters. "Turns out hell came to us first." Geologists traced the collapse to a perfect storm of natural and man-made factors. The town sat atop the Damon Mound Salt Dome, a subterranean formation where decades of oil drilling had hollowed out caverns. Heavy rains the previous week acted like a lubricant, weakening the dome's ceiling until it pancaked inward. The result was a sinkhole with an identity crisis, part industrial disaster, part geological spectacle. As it deepened, pressurized salt water from ancient seabeds surged to the surface, creating bizarre whirlpools that spat up brine shrimp species unseen for millennia. Scientists declared it a natural time capsule, albeit one that smelled like a refinery explosion. Dezetta's resilience became legend. While other towns might have panicked, residents treated the sinkhole like an uninvited but fascinating guest. The local high school baseball team held fundraisers selling "I Survived the Dezetta Abyss" t-shirts, while farmers used drones to film the crater's growth like proud parents documenting a child's growth spurts. Even the oil companies adapted, rerouting pipelines around the ever-expanding maw with grudging respect for nature's persistence. When the sinkhole finally stabilized at 600 feet wide, it didn't divide the town, it became its unlikely centerpiece. Kids skipped school to toss pebbles into the abyss, counting seconds until the distant splash. Engineers gave impromptu geology lessons at the safety fences. And every anniversary, the community gathers to toss flowers into the brine, a toast to the hole that tried and failed, to swallow their spirit, the strangest twist. The sinkhole became Dezetta's economic lifeline. Curiosity seekers flocked to the Texas Grand Canyon, as billboards dubbed it, lining up for guided ATV tours along the crater's rim. The diner that nearly slid into oblivion now serves a sinkhole burger with extra hot sauce to tourists who pose for selfies where the parking lot used to be. Even the oil industry capitalized, using high-resolution scans of the collapse to improve drilling safety nationwide. In a final act of defiance, the town built a viewing platform over the pit, its plaque reading, "Dezetta's hole, we didn't dig it, but we own it." Somewhere beneath that murky brine lie shattered pipelines and twisted machinery, monuments to the day the earth reminded everyone who's really in charge. While most towns would buckle under the weight of geological betrayal, Dezetta wore its sinkhole like a badge of honor. Within weeks of the collapse, Main Street businesses rebranded with dark humor. The former hardware store hung a banner reading, "Got a hole to fill." "We've got shovels," while the lone surviving gas station sold souvenir vials of crude oil labeled "Authentic Sinkhole Perfume." Even the high school got in on the act, changing its mascot from the Bulldogs to the Sinkers, complete with a new logo featuring a grinning cartoon crater. This wasn't just resilience, it was defiance distilled into Texas-sized wit. The real genius came in how the town monetized disaster. Local mechanic Hank Rawlins turned his half-swallowed tow truck into an art installation, welding it to a steel platform so it appeared to teeter eternally over the abyss. Tourists now pay $5 to take selfies in the driver's seat, cranking the wheel like they're steering away from doom. Meanwhile, diner owner Maria Gutierrez transformed her cracked parking lot into The Ledge, an open-air eatery where patrons munch chicken fried steak while watching the whole belch methane bubbles. "Best dinner theater in Texas," she brags, handing out free antacids with a check. Scientists initially scoffed at the town's cavalier attitude until they saw the data. Dezetta's sinkhole became the most thoroughly documented collapse in history because residents treated it like a nosy neighbor. Old-timers kept handwritten logs of its growth spurts. April 3rd, 8 Ms. Perkins rose bushes, God rest her soul. Teens launched weather balloons with GoPros to film its deepening maw. This amateur surveillance network caught something professionals missed: the sinkhole pulsed. Its walls contracted slightly at dawn, likely from temperature changes, giving it an eerie rhythm locals dubbed the Earth's heartbeat. When researchers from Rice University confirmed the phenomenon, they credited Desert as citizen seismologists in their published papers. The ultimate testament to the town's spirit, they stole the sinkhole's thunder at its own game. When Netflix proposed a disaster documentary, the city council counteroffered, "Film here, but we write the script." The resulting special, Swallow This, framed the crater as a quirky character rather than a villain, complete with cartoon thought bubbles imagining what it might eat next. Ratings soared when a local blues band debuted, "My Baby Left Me for That Hole," at the premiere. Even nature seemed to respect the hustle. Wildflowers now bloom along the crater's rim in spring, a vibrant collar around the town's unlikely necktie. Somewhere beneath the brine and twisted oil pipes lies the real moral of Desert's story. Disasters don't define communities, people do. While other towns cursed their sinkholes, this one threw a block party around theirs. When a geologist warned the pit might eventually double in size, the mayor just grinned and ordered more souvenir shot glasses. "That's fine," he drawled. Bigger holes mean bigger stories, and in Texas, stories outlast even the hungriest ground. Jerome, Arizona clung to the side of Cleopatra Hill like a stubborn barnacle, its rickety wooden buildings defying gravity long after the copper mines ran dry. The town earned its nickname, America's most vertical city. Honestly, streets so steep parked cars sometimes rolled downhill on their own. But in 1953, the ground beneath this Wild West relic staged its own rebellion. It began with a sound residents described as a mountain groaning, followed by the sickening crunch of Main Street's general store vanishing into a yawning pit. Within hours, half of Jerome's historic downtown slumped into the earth like a drunk collapsing into bed, taking with it saloons, assay offices, and whispers of a fortune in lost silver bars. The disaster had been brewing since Jerome's heyday, when miners blasted over 80 miles of tunnels beneath the town like termites hollowing a tree. The United Verd mine, once the richest copper deposit in the West, had left behind a honeycomb of unstable stopes and caverns. When groundwater finally weakened the last fragile pillars holding up the town, the collapse wasn't just geological, it was poetic justice. Locals joked that the mine, having swallowed generations of workers, was now reclaiming its due with interest, yet beneath the gallows humor lay genuine fear. Jerome's remaining residents tiptoed around new cracks in their floors, wondering if their homes would be next on the menu. What made Jerome's sinkhole legendary weren't just the lost buildings, but the stories sealed beneath them. Rumor swore the collapsing assay office took with it a safe containing 20,000 ounces of silver, a fortune even by today's standards. Treasure hunters still sneak into the restricted sinkhole area with metal detectors, despite signs warning of unstable ground. Others tell of stranger prizes, a reputed stash of Victorian-era brothel tokens, or the fabled Devil's Payroll gold coins allegedly hidden by a crooked mine boss before he vanished in 1898. Most intriguing is the claim that the hole exposed a previously unknown level of the mine, its walls scrawled with 19th century graffiti, including the ominous phrase, "Lucky we got out." Then there are the sounds. Park rangers report unnerving phenomena near the collapse zone. Phantom pickaxe strikes echoing from below, even when the mines are deserted. Late-night visitors describe chilly drafts rising from fissures, carrying whiffs of dynamite smoke and, is that tobacco? The most persistent legend involves the shift boss, a spectral figure in coveralls said to emerge from the sinkhole's shadows when the moon is high. Witnesses claim he asks for a light, then vanishes when offered a match. Skeptics blame seismic activity or pranksters, but the stories stick like Arizona dust. Today, Jerome embraces its duality as both tourist trap and ghost town. The stabilized sinkhole is a macabre selfie spot, ringed by plaques detailing which buildings it devoured. Gift shops sell vials of genuine sinkhole dirt alongside maps marking rumored treasure sites. At the town's Spirits Room bar, locals will toast you with a cave-in cocktail, while debating whether the real riches are still down there or if something else is. Because in Jerome, the past never stays buried. It just waits for the right moment to swallow the present whole. The boarded-up buildings surrounding Jerome's sinkhole might warn, "Keep out," but for a certain breed of adventurer, those words are an irresistible invitation. Urban explorers slink past the fences at dusk, their headlamps cutting through dust-choked air as they descend into the ruins. What draws them isn't just the thrill, it's the chance to touch history where it's still raw. One misstep on the crumbling edges could send them sliding into the same abyss that swallowed the assay office, yet they press on, documenting cracks that spiderweb across floors like frozen lightning. Local authorities have slapped these modern-day prospectors with trespassing fines for decades, but the allure of lost silver and ghostly whispers keeps the bold coming back. The dangers are as layered as the collapsed mine shafts below. Rotten floorboards disguise 100-foot drops, and pockets of toxic gas, left over from blasting operations a century ago, linger in unseen chambers. Explorer Mateo Ruiz nearly became permanent resident in 2018 when a false floor gave way beneath him. "One second I'm filming brickwork, the next I'm dangling over nothing," he recalled, his harness creaking as teammates hauled him up. His GoPro footage shows the moment in stomach-lurching detail. Flashlight beams illuminating a void where entire buildings had tipped sideways into the darkness, their shattered windows grinning like broken teeth. What makes these ruins especially treacherous isn't just instability, it's deception. The sinkhole's edges appear solid until weight touches them, a cruel trick of compressed debris. Veteran explorers test each step with iron rods, listening for the hollow knock that signals unseen voids. Even then, the ground shifts unpredictably. Last summer, a rainstorm triggered a fresh collapse, swallowing the remains of the old post office that had somehow clung on for 70 years. The sinkhole doesn't just sit there, it's always hungry. Yet the rewards tempt the reckless. Faded mining maps hint at sealed tunnels beneath the rubble, potentially leading to untouched pockets of the original mine. In 2020, a team using ground-penetrating radar detected an anomalous metal mass 20 feet below the crater's debris pile. Could it be the fabled safe full of silver? No one's gotten close enough to find out. The town's unofficial policy turns a blind eye to explorers until someone gets hurt. Then the lawsuits fly, the fences go up, and the cycle begins again. Jerome's police chief, a former mine safety inspector, sums it up while sipping coffee at the Spirits Room bar. "That holds like a bad relationship. You know it's trouble, but dang if it doesn't keep you curious." Outside, the wind whistles through cracks in the ruins, sounding for all the world like a harmonica playing an old miner's tune. Some say it's just the geography, others swear it's the shift boss still on patrol, warning folks away from where the Earth's patience ran out. Either way, the message is clear: not all treasures are meant to be dug up again. Some stories stay buried for a reason. Traffic on Atlanta's I-85 crawled as usual that Thursday evening until the road itself decided to quit. It started with a tremor commuters mistook for an earthquake, then a deafening roar as 3 lanes of one of America's busiest highways peeled away like rotten floorboards. Cars screeched to a halt just feet from a chasm 20 feet deep and twice as wide, its edges crumbling inward like a sandcastle at high tide. Within minutes, the collapse turned Atlanta's central artery into a parking lot, trapping thousands of drivers in a gridlock that would last for months. But this wasn't just another infrastructure failure. The I-85 sinkhole exposed a terrifying truth. Beneath the sleek surface of modern highways lies a crumbling skeleton of neglected pipes and century-old tunnels, any one of which could be the next ticking time bomb. The culprit wasn't rain or natural erosion, it was a rusted stormwater culvert installed in the 1930s, forgotten until it finally rusted through. Engineers later traced the disaster to a perfect storm of neglect. Decades of road expansions had piled weight atop the frail metal pipe, while acidic runoff from de-icing salts accelerated its decay. No one had inspected it in over 20 years. When it finally gave way, the collapsing tunnel dragged tons of asphalt and concrete into its vortex, leaving behind a jagged scar visible from satellite images. The timing couldn't have been crueler. Rush hour traffic meant countless witnesses captured the aftermath on their phones. A school bus teetering on the edge, its front wheels dangling over emptiness, while frazzled commuters abandoned their cars to gape at the destruction. What followed was a masterclass in urban chaos. With I-85 carrying 250,000 vehicles daily, the collapse triggered a transportation heart attack across the southeast. GPS systems short-circuited, trying to reroute the equivalent of a city's population through neighborhood streets. Delivery trucks idled for hours, spoiling perishable goods. Ambulances blared sirens in vain as side roads seized with gridlock. The economic toll surpassed $40 million per day, not just from lost productivity, but from the domino effect of rerouted supply chains. A single sinkhole had essentially amputated Atlanta's circulatory system, proving how fragile our interconnected infrastructure truly is. The repair effort became an around-the-clock spectacle. Crews worked under stadium lights, dumping enough gravel to fill 2 Olympic swimming pools into the pit before layering it with steel-reinforced concrete. Engineers faced unprecedented challenges. They weren't just fixing a hole, but rebuilding over an active construction zone where the ground could shift again. Drones monitored the site for new fractures, while sensors embedded in the fresh pavement tracked even microscopic movements, the most unsettling discovery. Sonar scans revealed 6 more compromised culverts beneath adjacent lanes, any of which could have triggered a second collapse. Atlanta's ordeal forced cities nationwide to confront their own infrastructure skeletons. Many urban tunnels and pipes date back to the New Deal era, long outlasting their 50-year life expectancy. Some Northeast cities still rely on brick sewers laid before the Civil War. The I-85 disaster proved that out of sight doesn't mean safe. It just means we're gambling with invisible decay. Today, Atlanta inspects its culverts quarterly, but the real legacy lies in the commuters who glance nervously at every new pothole, wondering what's crumbling beneath their tires. Because sometimes progress doesn't move forward, it falls straight down. Atlanta's highway collapse turned into a high-stakes race against time, with crews working under floodlights as commuters counted every lost minute. The repair team faced a nightmare scenario. Not only did they need to fill a gaping chasm, but they had to rebuild over unstable ground still shifting from the original collapse. Engineers deployed an army of dump trucks hauling enough gravel to bury a football field 2 stories deep, followed by a steel skeleton of rebar to anchor the new roadbed. Concrete poured in continuous 24-hour shifts, hardening under industrial heaters to combat the unseasonably cold spring nights. Every delay cost the region millions, turning what would normally be a 6-month project into a 43-day sprint that broke urban construction records. The economic shockwaves rippled far beyond traffic jams. Truckers idling in detours burned through fuel budgets, while perishable shipments from Georgia peaches to Gulf shrimp spoiled in unmoving trailers. Hotels near the shutdown reported vacancies as conventions cancelled, and restaurants saw lunch crowds vanish with downtown workers telecommuting. The most brutal hit came to hourly employees. Without reliable transit, many low-wage workers lost shifts or jobs entirely. Economists later calculated the total toll at nearly $2 billion, equivalent to a hurricane strike without the federal disaster aid. Yet the crisis birthed unexpected innovations. Traffic engineers rerouted entire highway interchanges using artificial intelligence, analyzing real-time GPS data to optimize detours minute by minute. Drones equipped with thermal cameras scanned the repair site for hidden weaknesses, while social media became a lifeline for stranded drivers sharing backroad shortcuts. The collaboration turned adversarial neighbors into ally suburbanites, offered spare bedrooms to downtown workers, while rival construction firms pooled equipment to accelerate the rebuild. When the repaired highway finally reopened 3 weeks ahead of schedule, the celebration felt less like a ribbon cutting and more like a survivor's reunion. Drivers honked horns not in frustration but in solidarity, rolling past crews who hadn't seen their families in weeks. The real legacy of I-85's collapse wasn't just a sturdier road, it was a wake-up call written in asphalt and steel. Infrastructure report cards had long warned of America's crumbling backbone, but now the abstract had a face: a school bus dangling over rubble, a nurse walking 10 miles to her hospital shift, a farmer watching his crop rot in fields because trucks couldn't reach him. Atlanta's sinkhole became a national shorthand for neglected systems everywhere, proving that when we ignore what's beneath our feet, the ground eventually answers back loudly. Deep in Oklahoma's peanut country, where the prairies stretch flat to the horizon, the earth is slowly opening its jaws. The so-called Oklahoma Giant isn't your typical sinkhole. It's a living, breathing chasm that's been expanding at the rate of a football field every 2 years, swallowing trees, fences, and even entire sections of county road like some unstoppable geological Pac-Man. Locals don't just fear it, they've learned to predict its moods. When the cattle start avoiding a particular patch of grass or rainwater disappears into the ground without pooling, folks know the giant is stirring again. The first sign of trouble came in 1986 when a farmer named Harlan Stubbs noticed his wheat field developing a mysterious dip. Within weeks, that dip became a gully, then a crater 30 feet deep. Geologists initially blamed standard limestone erosion until the hole kept growing long after it should have stabilized. Today, the crater spans over 8 acres with steep walls of exposed red dirt that crumble like stale cornbread at the slightest disturbance. What makes the Oklahoma Giant so unnerving isn't just its size, but its voice. Visitors who stand too close report hearing eerie pops and groans from the depths, a reminder that the collapse is far from finished. Scientists confirmed those sounds are likely boulders shifting in underground caverns, but try telling that to the teenagers who swear they've heard something whispering back up at them from the darkness. The forces feeding this monster are as bizarre as its behavior. Unlike Florida's water-dissolved sinkholes or Louisiana's man-made collapses, the Oklahoma Giant owes its existence to an underground salt layer thicker than the Empire State Building is tall. Over millennia, groundwater transformed parts of this salt deposit into briny channels, creating voids that eventually caved under the weight of the plains above. But here's where it gets weird. The collapse triggered a chain reaction. As overlying rocks fractured, they exposed new salt to water, which accelerated the erosion in a vicious cycle. Essentially, the sinkhole is self-perpetuating, eating its way sideways through the earth like a subterranean termite. For Pottawatomie County residents, living near the giant means constantly recalculating risk. Survey crews paint bright orange lines marking the predicted growth zone each year, but the hole routinely ignores those boundaries. In 2012, it abruptly veered east, devouring a storage shed before anyone realized it had changed course. Ranchers now move livestock barns annually, while the highway department gave up repairing County Line Road altogether. The asphalt just kept cracking like peanut brittle. The most haunting sight: telephone poles leaning at 45-degree angles where the ground beneath them has partially collapsed, their wires stretched taut over the abyss like a spiderweb across a canyon. Scientists monitor the giant with a mix of fascination and dread. Laser scans reveal a labyrinth of unstable chambers beneath the visible crater, some large enough to swallow a barn hole. The real nightmare scenario: if the sinkhole reaches a nearby natural gas pipeline or intersects with one of Oklahoma's countless abandoned oil wells, it could trigger a catastrophic rupture. For now, the only thing slowing its march is a taxpayer-funded project pumping concrete into key weak points. A band-aid on a bullet wound, admits one geologist. Standing at the edge, watching clods of dirt break loose and vanish into the depths, you realize the unsettling truth: some forces can't be stopped, they can only be outrun. Scientists studying the Oklahoma giant don't mince words. This isn't just a sinkhole, it's a geological time bomb with an unpredictable fuse. Their latest projections, based on LiDAR scans and seismic monitoring, paint a chilling picture. At its current growth rate, the crater could swallow another 50 acres within the next decade. But the real fear isn't the hole itself. It's what happens when it reaches the web of abandoned oil wells and gas pipelines crisscrossing the region like a buried minefield. We're not just watching land disappear, warns geologist Dr. Elena Vasquez of the Oklahoma Geological Survey. We're counting down to a potential chain reaction. The nightmare scenario, a rupture in the Enterprise Products pipeline, which carries highly pressurized natural gas just 800 yards from the sinkhole's eastern edge. A collapse there could trigger an explosion visible for miles, not to mention cripple energy supplies across the Midwest. Then there's the groundwater threat. The giant's expanding fractures are already redirecting underground streams, potentially contaminating drinking supplies with brine from the ancient salt layers below. Satellite data reveals even more unsettling trends. Entire sections of land southeast of the crater are subsiding at a rate of 6 inches per year, suggesting new collapse zones are forming beyond the current pit. For nearby towns like Asher and Kanawha, these predictions aren't abstract doomsday scenarios, they're playing out in real time. Kanawha's high school football field developed sudden cracks last season, forcing the team to play home games in neighboring towns. Local ranchers report cattle mysteriously breaking legs in fields where the ground looks intact, only for probes to reveal hidden cavities just inches below the surface. It's like living on eggshells, says fifth-generation farmer Roy Stodd, who's lost 3 grain silos to unexpected subsidence since 2020. The most alarming research comes from a team at OU's ConocoPhillips School of Geology who have been injecting fluorescent dyes into the sinkhole's fissures. Their tracking shows the underground erosion isn't just spreading, it's accelerating, with new tributaries forming at twice the rate observed 5 years ago. Imagine drilling holes in a cardboard box, then watching the gaps connect, explains lead researcher Dr. Marcus Trent. That's what's happening beneath Pottawatomie County, except the box is half a mile thick. Their models suggest the giant could eventually merge with smaller sinkholes to the north, creating a collapse corridor stretching over 20 miles. Despite the dire forecast, solutions remain stuck in bureaucratic limbo. Relocating entire communities would cost hundreds of millions, and attempts to stabilize the sinkhole with grout injections have proven futile. The voids are simply too vast. Some engineers propose a radical alternative, controlled flooding to dissolve remaining salt layers evenly, preventing sudden collapses, but the risks are staggering. One miscalculation could trigger catastrophic new sinkholes or even reactivate ancient fault lines. For now, the official stance is watchful waiting, with monthly drone surveys tracking every inch of growth. Yet in typical Oklahoman fashion, locals have turned anxiety into dark humor. The Kanawha Chamber of Commerce sells giant survival kits, joke boxes containing a mini flashlight, a bag of Oklahoma dirt, and a coupon for free pancakes at the local diner, when not if your house falls in. It's a coping mechanism masking a deeper truth. In places where the earth itself is unstable, resilience isn't a choice. It's the only option left. As one county commissioner put it during a tense town hall meeting, nobody's abandoning their granddaddy's land because the ground's got a case of the vanishes. The unspoken question hangs heavy: how many vanishes will it take before that changes? Behind the magic of Disney World's perfectly manicured gardens and fairy tale castles lies a secret the company never wanted you to know. The ground nearly betrayed them. In July 1998, maintenance crews working near Epcot's World Showcase Lagoon stumbled upon something that sent shockwaves through Disney's upper management. A 30-foot wide depression forming beneath the park's iconic geodesic sphere. Leaked internal reports later revealed the terrifying truth. An underground cavity had been silently expanding for years, weakened by Florida's porous limestone and the constant vibration of thousands of daily visitors. One engineer's memo, marked urgent, warned the sinkhole could reach critical size within weeks, potentially swallowing part of the park's infrastructure. The response was straight out of a corporate thriller. Overnight, Disney sealed off the area under the guise of routine renovations, diverting foot traffic with cleverly placed character meet and greets. Construction crews worked in 3 shifts, pumping over 200 truckloads of grout into the void while Mickey Mouse balloons and upbeat parade music masked the noise. Former employees described being sworn to secrecy under threat of termination, with one electrician recalling supervisors confiscating cell phones near the site. They treated it like a national security breach, he told a reporter years later. We had code words for equipment, cement trucks were ice cream vendors, and the sinkhole itself was Tinker Bell's hideout. Rumors of a cover-up gained traction when aerial photos surfaced showing suspicious dirt mounds near Germany Pavilion, exactly where ground-penetrating radar later confirmed the cavity lay. Disney's official statement blamed soil settling, but internal documents obtained by OSHA told a different story. Engineers had known about unusual water drainage patterns in the area since 1995 but dismissed them as harmless. The real shock came when divers inspecting the lagoon's foundation found cracks radiating outward like spiderwebs, suggesting the entire World Showcase was built atop a honeycomb of unstable cavities. Had the sinkhole reached the water table, it could have triggered a catastrophic flood, sending millions of gallons into underground utility tunnels where hundreds of employees worked daily. The aftermath reshaped Disney's approach to geology forever. Today, the company employs its own team of full-time geologists conducting monthly ground stability scans across all parks. Hidden sensors monitor for micro-movements in real time, while new attractions undergo rigorous subsurface imaging before construction, but the most telling legacy. Future World's redesign included subtle changes, wider walkways near water features, less dense landscaping allowing for easier sinkhole monitoring. It's a quiet admission that even the so-called happiest place on Earth isn't immune to nature's whims. Next time you stroll past Spaceship Earth, glance down at those perfectly laid pavers. What looks like flawless engineering might just be the world's most expensive bandage, hiding scars from the day Mickey Mouse almost lost his footing. Disney's solution to their sinkhole crisis wasn't just quick, it was an engineering masterclass disguised as routine maintenance. Behind those cheerful, "Pardon our pixie dust" signs, crews worked around the clock on a secret stabilization project dubbed Operation Bedrock. The first step involved injecting over 800,000 gallons of a specialized polyurethane grout into the cavities beneath Epcot. This wasn't ordinary cement, it was a space-age foam that expanded 30 times its liquid volume, filling every microscopic crack in the limestone like invisible rebar. Workers drilled through parking lots and service tunnels after hours, their heavy machinery muffled by sound-dampening barriers designed to look like decorative garden walls. The real innovation came in how they monitored the repairs. Imagineers developed miniature sensor pods shaped like rocks and sprinkler heads, embedding them throughout the park's infrastructure. These geoguards constantly measured ground movement, temperature, and moisture levels, feeding data to a secret control room beneath Spaceship Earth. Former project manager Carlos Mendez described the system in a rare interview. "We could detect a soda can dropping 50 feet underground. If anything shifted more than 1/16 of an inch, alarms would go off before human senses could notice." The sensors tied into Disney's existing network of underground tunnels, allowing engineers to investigate anomalies without guests ever seeing work crews. Perhaps the most brilliant fix was invisible to visitors: the installation of a massive drainage matrix beneath World Showcase Lagoon. Instead of fighting Florida's water table, Disney embraced it, creating an artificial aquifer that constantly equalizes pressure beneath the park. 16 hidden pumping stations maintain perfect balance, silently shunting millions of gallons between chambers to prevent new voids from forming. This system doubles as emergency flood control. During hurricanes, it can drain entire sections of the park in minutes to relieve underground stress. The project's crowning achievement, reinventing how future attractions get built. New constructions now float on geo-rafts, enormous concrete platforms supported by hydraulic jacks that automatically adjust for ground settling. The Seven Dwarfs Mine Train Coaster was the first to use this tech, its track designed to flex like a roller skate on rubber joints rather than crack under shifting earth. Even flower beds became part of the solution, with their irrigation systems modified to slowly distribute stabilizing mineral solutions into the soil. Disney's Sinkhole Scare transformed more than just their property, it revolutionized theme park engineering worldwide. Universal Studios and Six Flags later adopted versions of their sensor networks, while geotechnical firms now use Disney-patented grout formulas for skyscraper foundations. Yet the most telling detail remains hidden in plain sight. Next time you notice an oddly placed planter or decorative boulder in a Disney park, look closer. That might not be landscaping. It could be the tip of a $40 million fix, wrapped in pixie dust and smiling back at you. The rumble started subtly, a vibration beneath the tires of the M22 bus as it turned onto 3rd Avenue that rainy November morning. Passengers glanced up from their phones, mistaking it for another subway train passing deep below. Then the asphalt erupted. A 20-foot section of Manhattan's East Village disintegrated like stale cake, swallowing the bus's rear wheels and tilting it violently toward the gap. Inside, commuters tumbled over seats as laptop bags and coffee cups cascaded into the newly formed abyss. I saw the subway tracks through the floor, recalled passenger Daniel Ruiz, his hands still shaking hours later. 1 second we're stopping for a light, the next we're staring into hell's basement. The chaos unfolded in terrifying slow motion for those trapped on board. The bus dangled precariously over the pit, its back end wedged against exposed century-old bricks from the original 1916 subway tunnel. Emergency responders faced a nightmare scenario. Any sudden movement could send the 30-ton vehicle plunging onto the live tracks 30 feet below. As NYPD officers rappelled down to evacuate passengers through escape hatches, MTA engineers made a gut-churning discovery: the sinkhole wasn't static. Security camera footage from a nearby deli captured the moment the crater expanded sideways, consuming 2 parked cars as water mains burst beneath them, transforming the street into a raging, muddy whirlpool. What made this collapse so shocking was its location, not some neglected back alley, but one of Manhattan's busiest thoroughfares, inspected just 6 months prior. The culprit, a perfect storm of aging infrastructure and bureaucratic blind spots. Investigators later traced the disaster to a cracked sewer line that had been leaking unnoticed into an abandoned 19th-century gas line trench. Over decades, the runoff carved a cavern beneath modern pavement layers, hidden from scans by the tangled web of fiber optic cables and steam pipes. "We're literally driving over ghosts," said urban archaeologist Dr. Miriam Kellogg, pointing to historical maps showing a maze of forgotten coal chutes and pneumatic tubes beneath the collapse site. Survivors' stories reveal how close this came to catastrophe. Schoolteacher Alicia Merton described the surreal sight of rats fleeing upward through cracks in the bus floor before the pavement gave way nature's evacuation order. Construction worker Jamal Wade, who pried open a rear emergency exit, recalled the stomach-dropping sensation of the bus creaking downward as he pulled the last passenger to safety. "That metal groan still plays in my dreams," he told reporters. The most haunting detail came from subway riders below, who felt debris rain onto their downtown 6 train just before power was cut. One commuter's viral video shows dust swirling through the tunnel like volcanic ash as the distant screams of bus passengers echo through vents. The aftermath became a wake-up call for cities worldwide. Thermal imaging of Manhattan's utility corridors revealed over 80 similar void pockets beneath major streets, some directly under skyscrapers. The near disaster accelerated a billion-dollar inspection program using electromagnetic scanners originally designed for mine detection. But the real legacy lies in small changes, the way New Yorkers now side-eye manhole covers steaming a little too vigorously, or how bus drivers instinctively avoid puddles that might disguise collapsing pavement. Because sometimes progress doesn't march forward, it drops out from under you without warning, leaving a bus full of strangers clinging to each other over the dark. Beneath Manhattan's gleaming skyscrapers and bustling streets lies a forgotten underworld, a labyrinth of crumbling brick tunnels, abandoned gas lines, and rotting wooden conduits older than the light bulb. These relics of 19th century engineering were never properly decommissioned. They were simply paved over, out of sight and out of mind. When the M22 bus plunged into that sinkhole, it didn't just expose a void, it ripped open a time capsule of neglect. Investigators tracing the collapse made a chilling discovery. The rupture began in a section of sewer pipe installed during the Taft administration. Its terracotta bricks eroded to the thickness of an eggshell. But the real shock came when they found what that pipe had been leaking into a cavernous void left behind by a failed 1883 pneumatic mail tube project. Its iron ribs rusted into lace. This was infrastructure collapse as historical reckoning. The pneumatic network, a Victorian-era marvel designed to whisk letters underground at 25 miles per hour, had been abandoned by 1927 when trucks made it obsolete. Yet no one bothered to fill the tunnels. Instead, they became secret tributaries for water leaks, their arched ceilings collecting drips from burst water mains and century-old steam pipes. Urban explorers occasionally documented these spaces, posting eerie photos of cobwebbed control levers and moss-coated rails, but official inspections never ventured beyond active utility lines. "We treat old infrastructure like old wallpaper," admitted one DP engineer after the collapse. "You don't think about what's behind it until the wall caves in." The hidden mechanics of the disaster read like an archaeological tragedy. As the sewer leak worsened over decades, it dissolved the lime mortar holding the pneumatic tunnel's bricks together. Rainwater from Hurricane Ida's remnants in 2021 accelerated the damage, pooling in the cavity until the weight of 21st century traffic proved too much. The bus's rear wheels didn't just break through asphalt, they shattered the last fragile barrier between modern New York and its industrial past. Sonar scans of the crater revealed a surreal cross-section, layers of cobblestones from 1850, horse carriage rails from 1870, and the ghostly outline of a Prohibition-era speakeasy's escape tunnel, all collapsing in a domino effect beneath 21st century concrete. What makes this sinkhole different from Florida's limestone collapses or Oklahoma's salt bed craters is its distinctly human fingerprint. This wasn't nature reclaiming space, it was the inevitable result of a city layering new systems atop old ones without ever removing the rotted foundations. Similar time bombs lurk beneath nearly every major American city. Chicago's freight tunnels, built in the 1890s and flooded in 1992, still require constant pumping to prevent another disaster. Boston's Big Dig famously uncovered colonial-era shipwrecks and a 17th century mill race beneath planned highway routes. Even Disney World's near catastrophe pales next to the sheer density of historical negligence packed beneath urban streets. The most unsettling revelation: this collapse was avoidable. British engineers had warned of the risks as early as 1952, when a London sewer inspector published a paper on the dangers of hollow ground beneath cities. His solution, systematic grouting of abandoned tunnels, was adopted across Europe but dismissed in the US as too costly. Now, as New York scrambles to scan every inch of subsurface infrastructure with ground-penetrating radar, the price tag makes those mid-century estimates look like pocket change. Perhaps the real sinkhole wasn't in the East Village pavement, but in our collective memory, a gaping void where foresight should have been. Because when you pave over history without learning from it, the ground always settles the score. Deep in the rolling ranchlands of California's Central Valley, where the air smells of dry grass and cattle, there's a hole in the earth that doesn't play by the rules. The locals call it the bottomless pit, though the rancher who owns the property insists it's technically 872 feet deep. At least, that's where the measuring equipment stopped working. What makes this sinkhole legendary isn't just its depth, but the sounds that rise from it on still nights, a cacophony of metallic groans, distant splashes, and something that suspiciously resembles a human whistle echoing back up the shaft. The first recorded mention of the pit dates back to the 1890s when a cattle driver named Elias Hargrove nearly lost his entire herd to its camouflaged mouth. His diary entry reads, "The earth opened up and swallowed 6 head without so much as a bellow. We threw stones down and never heard them strike bottom, only a wet sound like a belly digesting." Modern geologists have a less poetic explanation. The sinkhole taps into an ancient aquifer system where collapsing limestone created a vertical shaft so perfectly smooth it acts like a natural echo chamber. But try telling that to the farmhands who swear they've heard voices answering their shouts from below. What truly sets this sinkhole apart are the phenomena science struggles to explain. During a drought in 2015, ranchers noticed the pit sighing gusts of warm, damp air rising from its depths despite the surrounding land being parched. Temperature readings showed the air inside was a constant 68 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of the scorching valley heat or winter frost above. Then there are the objects that vanish. A drone lowered in 2019 captured footage of its camera glitching violently before the feed cut out entirely. When researchers retrieved the device, its memory card was wiped clean except for 1 second of audio that, when enhanced, contained a low-frequency pulse matching no known geological process. The most chilling incident occurred during a 2022 university expedition. Students lowering a hydrophone into the pit recorded what sounded like machinery clanking, though the nearest well pump was miles away. The recording went viral among paranormal forums, with some claiming it matched the rhythm of 19th-century oil derricks. Geologists countered that collapsing rocks can mimic industrial sounds, but the debate only deepened when a retired oil worker named Ray Talbot identified the exact cadence as a Baker Hughes drilling rig from the 1930s equipment that had supposedly never been used in the area. Today, the bottomless pit remains a magnet for curiosity and dread. The landowner allows limited scientific access but forbids overnight visits after his nephew reported seeing lights moving in patterns down the shaft. State geologists have mapped at least 12 similar sinkholes in the region, all linked to the same crumbling aquifer system, yet none whisper back. Standing at its edge at dusk, tossing a pebble and counting the seconds until silence. No splash, no echo, just the vague sense that something down there is listening. And maybe, just maybe, it's counting too. For every scientist scanning the bottomless pit with instruments, there's been a daredevil convinced they could conquer it with nothing but grit and a rope. In the summer of 1974, a rodeo rider named Tucker McAllister became the first to publicly attempt a descent, armed with little more than a miner's helmet and 200 feet of nylon climbing line. Locals gathered like it was a county fair, placing bets on how far he'd get before the pit spit him back out. McAllister made it 80 feet down before his rope began swaying violently, not from his movements, but from something tugging beneath him. Like a cat playing with yarn, he'd later describe his voice still shaky in a newspaper interview. By the time his pals hauled him up, the rope's end was frayed as if chewed, though no known geology could explain the damage. The next contender thought technology would outsmart the pit. In 1989, professional caver Diane Cole arrived with a state-of-the-art winch system and a team from the National Speleological Society. They'd mapped everything from Mammoth Cave to lava tubes in Hawaii, but the bottomless pit humbled them within hours. Cole's helmet camera captured the moment her rig's depth sensor short-circuited at 300 feet, despite being rated for 3 times that. Worse still, the video showed shadows moving against the limestone walls, not cast by her headlamp but seemingly from light sources deeper in the shaft. The team aborted when their communication line filled with static, then a whispery voice none could identify. Later analysis ruled out radio interference. "We don't know what spoke," Cole admitted in her report, "but it wasn't human." Then came the era of drones. In 2017, YouTuber Marcus Vega lowered a custom-built quadcopter equipped with floodlights and a 4,000-foot tether. The footage started normally lichen-covered walls, the occasional drip of groundwater until 600 feet down, when the camera abruptly panned sideways as if shoved. The livestream's 20,000 viewers saw the drone spin wildly before its lights illuminated something that defied explanation. A horizontal tunnel branching off the main shaft, its edges too smooth to be natural, with what appeared to be rusted metal rungs embedded in the wall. Seconds later, the feed cut to black. When Vega reeled up the tether, the drone was missing, its severed cable ends melted. Geologists called it a freak limestone fissure. Viewers called it proof the pit was never empty to begin with. Perhaps the most chilling attempt belonged to Jacob Ryland, a former Navy diver who descended in 2021 using a commercial deep-sea suit modified for cave exploration. His fiber-optic tether allowed real-time communication until minute 43 of his dive, when surface crews heard him gasp, "There's a..." before his mic erupted with a sound engineers likened to 1,000 sheets of metal being torn in half. Ryland's suit cameras kept recording as he plummeted past 800 feet, his scream distorting as atmospheric pressure crushed the microphone. The last frame showed his helmet light reflecting off something massive and curved below, a shape one forensic analyst compared to the rib cage of a blue whale, though nothing that size could exist in a freshwater aquifer. Rescue teams deemed recovery impossible, and Ryland's family eventually held a funeral with an empty casket. His final words, etched on his headstone, serve as the only epitaph the pit has ever allowed. There's a... These stories share an eerie pattern. Whether it's 19th century cowboys tossing dynamite to gauge depth, the explosions echoed for a full minute, or modern explorers with million-dollar tech, the pit offers the same lesson: some voids resist measurement. Not because they're empty, but because whatever fills them doesn't obey the rules we've written. The ranchers here have a saying when newcomers ask about the bottomless pit: "Don't throw anything in you aren't prepared to lose." They aren't talking about equipment. The Johnson family never imagined their suburban Michigan home would become a viral spectacle until the earth itself decided to redraw the property lines. It started with an innocuous crack in the basement wall that 14-year-old Liam noticed while doing laundry. It looked like someone took a pencil and ruler to the concrete, his mother, Sarah, recalled. They called a structural engineer who assured them it was normal settling. 3 sleepless nights later, at 4:17 in the morning, the house answered back with a sound Sarah would later describe as a giant biting into a celery stalk. The family bolted outside in pajamas just in time to watch their 2-story colonial split cleanly down the middle, the master bedroom tearing away from the kitchen like a slow-motion film edit. By sunrise, the sinkhole had widened to 15 feet, leaving their home a surreal diorama, a child's dinosaur wallpaper visible on one side, the stainless steel refrigerator tilting into the void on the other. Photographs of the bisected house circled the globe within hours. The most haunting image showed the family's intact dining room chandelier still glowing above the abyss, its light illuminating the layers of shattered plumbing and exposed foundation below. That chandelier was Grandma's wedding gift, Sarah told reporters, her voice breaking. It stayed on through the whole thing, like the house was trying to pretend everything was normal. Structural engineers later determined the sinkhole had followed the path of an abandoned clay drainage pipe from the 1920s, long since crushed by tree roots and forgotten beneath the neighborhood. The irony wasn't lost on the Johnsons. Their dream home had been undone by a defect older than their grandparents. What made this collapse uniquely unsettling was its surgical precision. Unlike the chaotic craters of Florida or Louisiana, this sinkhole behaved like a deliberate scalpel, exploiting the home's weakest mortar joints. Geologists compared it to pulling a tablecloth from beneath a set table if the tablecloth was made of limestone and the table was a family's entire life. The Johnsons watched from the safety of their neighbor's porch as firefighters gingerly retrieved their possessions. Wedding albums warped by sudden humidity, Liam's waterlogged baseball trophies, Sarah's intact perfume bottle somehow still perched on a crumbling vanity. The sinkhole took half our house but left my perfume, she later joked darkly on Good Morning America. Priorities, I guess. The emotional toll emerged in unexpected ways. 9-year-old Emma developed a fear of straight lines, convinced any crack in the sidewalk might blossom into another abyss. Liam obsessively checked the family's new rental home with a level, measuring door frames for even the slightest tilt. The disaster also exposed bizarre gaps in insurance policies. While structural damage was covered, the family learned too late that earth movement was considered a separate peril with stricter limits. Their case sparked a viral crowdfunding campaign that raised enough for a new down payment, though no amount of money could erase the visceral memory of watching their address become a geological exhibit. Today, the lot stands empty, the sinkhole stabilized with 80 tons of grout and a decorative boulder the neighborhood kids call the Guardian. The Johnsons drive past occasionally, noting how weeds have softened the crater's edges. Nature's reclaiming its workshop, Sarah mused during their last visit. What she didn't say, but her husband Mark understood, was that some fractures never fully heal, not in limestone, and not in the families who learn the hard way that home isn't always the safest place to land. The Johnson family's fight for compensation turned into a legal quagmire that exposed gaping flaws in how insurance companies handle geological disasters. Their policy promised full replacement cost for structural damage until the adjuster arrived, took one look at the bisected house, and declared it an act of God rather than a covered peril. What followed was a 9-month battle where the family learned the hard way that most homeowner policies treat sinkholes like earthquakes, sudden, catastrophic, and conspicuously excluded from standard coverage. They offered us $60,000, barely enough to demolish what was left, Mark Johnson recalled, shaking his head. Our mortgage alone was $200,000. The turning point came when their attorney, environmental law specialist Alicia Muro, uncovered a clause buried in the policy's fine print, coverage for collapse due to hidden decay. Using drone footage showing the abandoned clay pipe's path beneath their home, Muro proved the sinkhole wasn't some random act of nature. It was the direct result of human negligence dating back to the 1920s. That pipe was a ticking time bomb, she argued in court, displaying century-old county maps that showed developers knowingly built the neighborhood atop unstable filled dirt and forgotten infrastructure. The case hinged on a precedent from a similar Florida lawsuit where a collapsed septic tank was ruled man-made negligence, forcing the insurer to pay. What made the Johnsons' victory groundbreaking wasn't just their settlement, it rewrote how insurers assess sinkhole claims nationwide. Previously, companies relied on vague, natural phenomenon classifications to deny payouts. Now, thanks to this case, adjusters must investigate whether human activity from old mining tunnels to improperly abandoned wells contributed to the collapse. The ripple effects were immediate. Within a year, 5 major insurers revised their policies to specify coverage for human-exacerbated geological events. while 5 states introduced laws requiring mandatory sinkhole disclosures in real estate transactions. Yet the real cost couldn't be measured in dollars. Sarah Johnson kept meticulous records of every sleepless night spent researching case law instead of helping Emma with homework. Mark developed stress-induced tinnitus from the constant phone battles with claims supervisors. Even after their $300,000 settlement, a fraction of their total losses, the family faced a new nightmare. No insurer would cover their next home without exorbitant sinkhole riders. They eventually bought a condo instead, choosing concrete high-rise stability over suburban dreams. The cruelest twist, the very legal victory that helped them forced insurers to raise premiums for every homeowner in karst-rich regions. We became the cautionary tale, Sarah sighed, flipping through photos of their old backyard. People thank us for changing the system, but no one warns you how lonely it feels to be the precedent. Standing in their new living room 12 floors above the ground, she sometimes presses her palm to the wall, listening for cracks that'll never come. Some victories leave scars no payout can heal. Golfers lining up their putts on the 12th green of Tennessee's TPC Southwind course had no warning before the ground beneath them staged the ultimate sand trap sabotage. It was the final round of the 2021 FedEx Jude Championship, broadcast live to millions, when a 30-foot-wide sinkhole erupted mid-fairway, swallowing a golf cart whole and leaving one player's caddy knee-deep in crumbling earth. Cameras captured every surreal second, the pristine Bermuda grass rippling like water before splitting open, a $15,000 rangefinder vanishing into the abyss, and the stunned silence of commentators briefly lost for words. This wasn't just geological bad luck, it was nature pulling off the most dramatic sports interruption since a fog delay at Wimbledon. Forensic analysis revealed the sinkhole's origins traced back to the course's very construction. In the 1980s, developers had filled an old limestone quarry with loose sediment to create the undulating fairways, unaware that acidic rainwater would gradually dissolve the remaining rock pillars below. Like a Jenga tower missing critical blocks, the ground held just long enough for the PGA Tour's spotlight to arrive before collapsing on cue, the most ironic detail. The disaster struck near the course's signature, Blue Monster Water Hazard, a man-made lake that ironically helped mask the underground erosion by redirecting drainage patterns. The human drama unfolded with equal intensity. Pro golfer Scott Stallings' caddy, Chad Reynolds, became an instant meme when footage showed him leaping backward as his feet sank into the crater, his clipboard soaring through the air like a startled bird. "I've dodged alligators in Florida and hailstorms in Colorado," Reynolds later joked on Sports Center, but watching a golf cart get eaten by the earth. That's a new one. Tournament officials faced a logistical nightmare. How do you resume play when the literal playing field is disintegrating? Their solution was pure Southern ingenuity. A fleet of bulldozers arrived within hours, dumping enough gravel to fill the hole temporarily while TV crews strategically avoided wide shots of the patched scar for the remainder of the broadcast. Beyond the spectacle, the incident exposed vulnerabilities in how golf courses manipulate natural landscapes. TPC Southwind's sinkhole wasn't an isolated fluke. Over 80% of championship courses built on karst terrain show signs of subsurface instability, from subtle depressions to hidden caverns large enough to park maintenance equipment in. Modern superintendents now deploy ground-penetrating radar before major tournaments, scanning for ghost bunkers that might form overnight. The PGA even revised its rulebook, adding provisions for geological obstructions that allow players free relief if the Earth decides to join the game uninvited. Today, the repaired fairway bears a subtle tribute to its moment in the spotlight, a commemorative plaque dubbing it the divot heard round the world. Tour pros still approach the 12th hole with nervous glances at the turf, knowing no amount of club technology can outdrive the ultimate hazard, the ground itself. Because in golf, as in life, sometimes the biggest surprises don't come from above. They rise up to meet you when you least expect it. Tour pro Harris English was lining up his approach shot on that fateful 12th hole when the earth beneath his feet gave a subtle shudder, a warning he almost missed. His caddy, Chris Sticks Mazziotti, later described the moment like feeling the first tremors of an earthquake. Harris had just taken his backswing when I saw the turf ripple, Mazziotti recalled. Not like a gust of wind, more like something huge moving under a blanket. English's club connected with the ball milliseconds before the ground behind him yawned open, swallowing his golf bag and sending his water bottle cascading into the darkness. The crowd's gasp was audible on the broadcast as English staggered backward, his metal spike skidding on crumbling sod just inches from the edge. What saved him wasn't reflexes alone. Course designers had unknowingly placed that section of fairway atop a reinforced concrete pad, remnants of the old quarry's loading dock buried during construction. That hidden slab acted like a life raft, preventing the collapse from spreading beneath English's feet. If I'd taken one more step left during my follow-through, he told Golf Channel afterward, I'd have been the first pro to card a geological hazard on my scorecard. The near disaster was captured in terrifying detail by CBS's aerial drone, showing the exact spot where English's divot landed right on the razor's edge between safety and a 15-foot freefall. The incident sparked immediate changes in tournament protocols. PGA officials now require karst geology surveys for all courses hosting events, with emergency sinkhole response plans filed alongside standard weather contingencies. TPC Southwind's grounds crew pioneered a real-time monitoring system using seismic sensors originally developed for earthquake early warnings. These devices, buried at key points around the course, can detect subsurface shifts as subtle as a millimeter, triggering alarms that give players up to 90 seconds warning before potential collapses. The tour even revised its rulebook, adding provision G12. If a player's stance is compromised by sudden earth movement before stroke completion, the shot may be replayed without penalty. English's close call also reshaped player behavior in unexpected ways. Many pros now perform subconscious ground checks before shots, stamping their feet like hockey players testing ice thickness. Caddies have adopted geological terminology, calling out soft zones near water hazards where the earth feels spongy underfoot. The most poignant change came from English himself, who partnered with geologists to develop junior golf clinics that teach landform awareness alongside swing mechanics. Kids learn to read greens for slope, he explained at a recent clinic, but they should also know how to spot the cracks that whisper get back. Perhaps the most lasting legacy lies in the footage itself. That drone shot of English's near plunge has been analyzed by everything from sports biomechanists to civil engineers studying human reactions to instability. Frame-by-frame breakdowns show his left heel digging in instinctively, creating a tiny berm that bought him crucial milliseconds. Slow-motion replays reveal the exact moment his pupils dilated, a primal recognition of danger that transcends sport. Today, the video plays in safety briefings for course designers worldwide, not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that even the most manicured landscapes hold hidden teeth. And when Harris English approaches any 12th hole now, there's always a pause, an extra glance at the turf, a deeper breath before he draws his club. Because some lessons don't just change the game, they rewrite what we thought was solid ground. The Arctic tundra is supposed to be frozen solid, a vast, stable platform of permafrost that stayed locked in ice for millennia. But in Alaska's remote wilderness, the ground is waking up hungry. These aren't your typical sinkholes. They're methane-fueled monstrosities exploding from the thawing earth with enough force to flip trucks and topple trees. Scientists call them thermokarsts, but locals have a better name: drunken forests, where once sturdy spruce trees tilt at crazy angles like barflies at last call, their roots drowning in suddenly soupy ground. The most terrifying example appeared 80 miles north of Fairbanks in 2019, a crater 100 feet wide and 60 feet deep, its jagged edges still steaming in the sub-zero air. What made this collapse different wasn't just its size, but its violence. Trail cameras captured the moment it formed, the snow-covered tundra bulging upward like a boiling pot lid before detonating outward, hurling chunks of frozen peat the size of refrigerators 300 yards. Researchers arriving via helicopter found the crater floor littered with ancient mammoth bones and patches of bizarre, bubbling mud trapped methane from decomposing organic matter finally escaping after 30,000 years on ice. These collapses rewrite the landscape at nightmare speed. Satellite images show lakes vanishing overnight as their thawed basins drain into new underground channels. Roads built on supposedly stable permafrost develop wave-like buckles, then disappear entirely, like Alaska's famous Dalton Highway sinkhole that swallowed a semi-truck hole in 2017. The driver survived by clinging to nearby shrubs as 30 feet of roadway disintegrated beneath his rig. What unsettles geologists most is how unpredictably these failures occur. Traditional sinkholes give warning signs, cracks, slumping, slow subsidence, but thermokarsts form when ice wedges deep below the surface melt, causing the frozen soil above to lose its glue. The collapse happens in minutes with no visible warning above ground. The scariest part isn't what these holes take, it's what they release. Each crater belches staggering amounts of methane, a greenhouse gas 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide. That gas fuels a vicious cycle. As more permafrost thaws, more methane escapes, accelerating global warming and triggering even more collapses. Researchers at the University of Alaska Fairbanks measured one thermokarst emitting 3 tons of methane daily, equivalent to running 500 gasoline-powered cars non-stop. And these aren't isolated incidents. Over 5,000 new thermokarsts pockmark Alaska's North Slope alone since 2015. For indigenous communities, the changes aren't just scientific curiosities, they're existential threats. The Yupik village of Newtok is literally crumbling into the Ninglick River as protective permafrost vanishes, forcing a $100 million relocation. Hunters report lakes changing shape between seasons, stranding fish camps and disrupting migratory routes followed for generations. The land used to feel like stone beneath our snow machines, says Elder Nathan Tom. Now it's more like pudding. You don't know when it might swallow you. What happens next is written in the unstable earth itself. As temperatures rise, models predict up to 30% of Arctic permafrost could collapse by 2100, potentially releasing gigatons of stored carbon. Some scientists propose radical interventions like seeding tundra with cold-loving moss to insulate the ground, while others warn we've already passed a tipping point. Standing at the edge of one of these craters, watching methane bubbles break the surface of meltwater ponds, you're not just looking at a hole in the ground. You're staring into the fast-forward future of a planet unraveling from the frozen ground up. These Arctic sinkholes aren't just geological oddities, they're screaming alarm bells in a language written in thawing ice and belching methane. While Florida's limestone collapses or Louisiana's industrial craters happen in isolated bursts, the thermokarsts of the north are multiplying like a virus, fueled by a planet running a fever. The numbers tell a chilling story. Since 2015, Alaska's North Slope has seen a 300% increase in these methane-spewing pits, each one a byproduct of permafrost thawing at rates scientists once considered impossible. What makes this crisis different is its vicious cycle. Rising temperatures melt the ice. The melting releases greenhouse gases, and those gases trap more heat, creating a self-perpetuating nightmare where the ground itself becomes an accomplice to its own destruction. For indigenous communities like the Inupiat of Utqiagvik, these changes aren't abstract data points, they're rewriting survival itself. hunters who have navigated frozen trails for generations now carry ice picks to test the ground, knowing solid tundra can turn to slurry without warning. Last winter, a subsistence fisherman named Robert Aiken barely escaped when his snowmobile plunged through a seemingly stable lake, a spot his grandfather had crossed safely for 60 years. The ice calendar doesn't work anymore, he told researchers, holding up a weathered journal where his ancestors recorded safe travel routes by moon phases. Now those pages read like relics from a vanished world. The scientific repercussions are even more dire. Dr. Katie Walter Anthony, a leading permafrost researcher, describes these sinkholes as taproots to the past, punching through layers of frozen soil to release ancient carbon stores. When her team sampled gases from a newly formed thermokarst near Kotzebue, they found methane concentrations so high, a lit match made the escaping gas ignite into a 10-foot flame. But the real horror lies beneath. Satellite radar has detected thousands of sleeping sinkholes, areas where the ground is subtly sinking, pressurized methane building like bubbles in a shaken soda can. One such zone beneath the Yukon Delta covers 9 square miles. If it goes, the blast could dwarf the largest anthropogenic explosions in history. Yet the most unsettling twist isn't just the scale, it's the speed. Traditional sinkholes form over years or decades, but thermokarsts operate on climate change's accelerated timeline. In Siberia, a crater nicknamed the Gateway to Hell has grown from a pothole to a canyon over a mile long in less than 10 years, its walls collapsing so rapidly that drone footage captures entire sections sloughing off like rotten fruit. This isn't erosion, it's the Earth's skeleton dissolving in real time, and the feedback loops are already in motion. As more permafrost thaws, Arctic wildfires have increased fourfold, their soot darkening ice sheets and absorbing more heat. It's a cascade of consequences where every collapse begets another. What happens next hinges on a race between adaptation and oblivion. Engineers in Norway are testing refrigerated foundations for roads and buildings, essentially embedding coolant pipes to keep the ground artificially frozen. Meanwhile, the Alaskan village of Shishmaref, losing 30 feet of coastline annually, became one of the first U.S. communities to vote for full relocation, a process as heartbreaking as it is technologically daunting. But these are stopgaps, not solutions. The truth written in these collapsing landscapes is undeniable. We're not just witnessing climate change, we're standing on its shifting front lines, where every new crater is a fresh wound in a battle the ground is losing faster than we feared. And unlike sinkholes elsewhere, these holes won't stop growing when they've had their fill. They'll keep eating away at the frozen world until there's nothing left to give. From swallowing Porsches in Bowling Green to tearing homes in half in Michigan, these sinkhole stories prove the ground beneath us is anything but predictable. Each collapse reads like a geological horror story. Winter Park's neighborhood vanishing overnight, Bayou Corne's toxic maw belching crude oil, or the Oklahoma giant creeping closer to gas pipelines with every passing year. Even Disney World's perfectly manicured fantasy nearly crumbled into the abyss. These aren't just holes in the dirt, they're reminders that nature always has the final say, no matter how much concrete we pour or how deep we drill. What ties these stories together isn't just the chaos they caused, but the eerie randomness of their strikes. A family sleeps soundly one minute, their bedroom swallowed the next. A golfer lines up a putt only for the fairway to disintegrate mid-swing. Sinkholes don't discriminate, they'll open under highways, mansions, or even the middle of a Corvette museum, rewriting landscapes in seconds. And while science can explain the how, limestone erosion, salt dome collapses, rotting infrastructure, the when remains a terrifying mystery. We're left with one unsettling truth: the Earth's memory is long and its patience is infinite. But here's the wildest part: every one of these disasters also revealed something extraordinary about human resilience. The way Deseta turned its sinkhole into a tourist attraction, or how Winter Park's trauma became a lake of healing. The divers who braved flooded craters to map the unknown, and the families who rebuilt knowing the ground could betray them again. These stories aren't just about destruction, they're about adaptation, dark humor, and the stubborn refusal to let the planet have the last word. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a sinkhole's hunger firsthand? Maybe you've spotted a suspicious dip in your backyard or driven past a crater that wasn't there yesterday. Drop your stories in the comments. Every crack in the pavement has a tale to tell. And if you're craving more mind-bending mysteries from the world beneath our feet, hit subscribe. Because trust us, this is just the surface. The Earth's got plenty more surprises waiting to erupt, and we'll be here to uncover them all.